And hi, I'm Todd Welstein and work as a UI developer at NPR. The department I'm in is called Digital Media, and it's responsible for NPR's digital presence. It includes developers, QA people, DevOps, product owners, UX designers, product designers. We're responsible for the website, npr.org, apps like NPR One, APIs that power the website and the apps, and the internal content management system. And it's a high traffic site. So for example, in September, there were 86 million page views and 40 million unique users. My job as UI developer focuses on writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This particular talk is going to be divided into two parts. First part is color contrast, and it covers the basics of making adjustments for that. And the second part of this relates to alt text, specifically the null alt attribute value, and how that helps to reduce redundancy for our screen reader users. So contrast ratio refers to the relationship between foreground and background color. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines for AA specifies a minimum ratio of 4.5 for text and images of text. For large text, if text is over 18 points or 14-point bold, then the requirement gets lowered to 3.0. But this talk is going to focus on 4.5. There's some other exceptions to this rule as well. For example, text that's part of a logo or a brand name also has no requirements. The ratios themselves range from 1 to 21, 1 being completely invisible and 21 being very visible. In this particular example, I increased the font size so you can see it, but the first item that meets the 4.5 requirement is the third from the top. So you might be wondering, why did they choose 4.5 as the ratio? Well, according to the W3C, it's to account for the loss in contrast that results from moderately low visual acuity, congenital or acquired color deficiencies, or the loss of contrast sensitivity that typically accompanies aging. It goes on to say that this basically means someone with 20/40 vision. Someone with 20/40 vision is commonly thought of as having the acuity of someone who is about 80 years old. However, in addition to helping users with permanent disabilities, permanent visual difficulties, the guidelines also help people with transient issues. And what's a transient issue? Well, if you're outside and you're using your phone on a sunny day, there might be glare on the screen. Or if you're viewing a presentation on a bad overhead projector, there also might be. So this can help everybody. There's many tools out there that can check color contrast. A few are listed here, but this talk is going to focus on the last one, which is the Google Accessibility Developer Tools, which is a Chrome extension that you can get in Chrome Web Store. So here is a typical story on npr.org. There is a large photo, a caption underneath, and a photo credit. I took the photo and changed the caption color so that it no longer meets requirements. The ratio for Chicago skyline is right now 2.32. And so now we can pretend that we're going to use the Google Accessibility Developer Tools to fix this. So once the extension is installed, you can open DevTools and go to the audits pane, where there'll be a new option for accessibility. And you run an audit, and you're presented with a list of findings. So one list includes color contrast, which is what we're looking at right now. And the photo caption is highlighted in red, so it's a paragraph tag. If you right-click that paragraph tag, you're taken to the Elements panel, and there's also a new pane here too, called Accessibility Properties, all the way on the right side. And you can see that the contrast is indeed 2.32, and there's other options there. So you can test out what AA or AAA will look like. If you click the icons directly next to those hex codes, you'll see immediately in the browser what the new color looks like. And if you like it, you can copy the hex code and paste it into your CSS. So if we pretend that we click on the AA icon, we get this. So the before version's on the left, and the right version, the after version's on the right. It's a little difficult to see on the projector, but there is a difference. And this is the process that we went through for the entire site. So it was a very manual process. And there are many different templates for npr.org. There's music homepage, music pages, podcast directory. And all of these templates have different permutations because the content management systems are very flexible. You can put different assets in different categories, different locations, and configure them differently. So we covered a big chunk of the site, but it's still an ongoing process. When you're doing this, there are going to be issues outside of your control and also false positives, depending on the tool you use. Items outside of your control include ads from a third-party server or embeds, like video or any type of third-party embed that has content that's text. The Google Accessibility Developer Tools looks at those too and will give you warnings. It will flag them if they don't meet contrast requirements. There's not much you can do about that except notify the originators of those ads or embeds about the problem. False positives include, so there's certain ways to hide users while keeping it readable by screen readers. And depending on the CSS technique you use, if you deliberately want to hide text from cited users, the accessibility developer tools may still flag those items as being a problem. So for us, we're seeing that a lot. And so you can either ignore them or try to figure out a different technique that the developer tools would ignore. Also, as I mentioned, logos and branding related text, they are exempt from the contrast requirements, but they'll still get flagged if you're using web fonts or just plain text. That said, here are a few examples of before and after from the site. Again, it might be a little bit difficult to see the difference on the projector. What on top is before and on the bottom is after. This is the home page. We adjusted the blue color for the navigation links. This is the small breakpoint navigation. And again, the blue color has been altered. This is a larger breakpoint. Top is before, bottom is after. It's a little hard to see. This type of visual pattern is pretty common on the site. In this case, the tagline, Stories of Life in a Changing World, was adjusted. It's pretty obvious here. Here is a music story page for small screen. Pretty much every element was adjusted. This is commonly on a story page. It talks about, it's a topic, it's related to the topic of the story. And before is on the left and after is on the right. Here's the audio player when it's not playing. The text resume listening now meets the requirements. This is from the podcast directory. The topic business was changed. And then lastly, here's the player. This is, again, pretty hard to see, but the background, the light blue background beneath the bottom portion of the player was made darker so that the timing information and the text in the center would meet contrast requirements. Keep in mind, if you're doing this, there may be other assets on the page that you need to change. Those icons above, the play icon, the rewind icon, skip icon, are all SVGs. And so when we changed the blue of the player, we also had to change the SVG blue color to match the new shade of blue that we're using. So those are a few examples, but after doing this, you may find that the color palette you're using in your CSS may grow. We already had a problem on the site where there were many similar shades of colors, and it was hard to tell what was intentional and what was caused from using the eyedropper tool on the wrong part of a compressed comp. So after doing this, we ended up with 198 colors, which was a lot, and some of them are very similar. So very briefly, there are ways you can slim this down. There's a tool called Parker that will generate a list of all the different colors in your code base. And you can take that list and run it through a tool called CSS Color Guard that will run that list through an algorithm to show you pairs of visually semi-indistinguishable colors. But when you're doing that, you have to be mindful that you're not going to reintroduce the color contrast issue. So we manually went and tried to combine colors while making sure that the color contrast was above 4.5. Once we finished that, we ended up with 78 distinct colors, which still may seem like a lot, but the site is big, and this takes into account everything. A nice side effect of simplifying colors and organizing them is that you can programmatically create a color swatch guide for other developers and designers. This will hopefully allow people to choose combinations that have already been vetted and less likely to introduce contrast problems. So that's part one. Part two is about the null alt attribute value. So what is the null alt attribute value? It looks like this. This is a very simplified IMG tag. What the alt text, the alt attribute value is equal to an empty string here. This is not the same thing as having no alt attribute value. But why would you want to do this? Well, alt text should typically not be redundant or provide the same information that is already on the page. So going back to our example story here, there's an image with a caption that says Chicago skyline. In the past, before we made any changes, the IMG tag was basically like this. It was the same text and the alt attribute as was already on the page as the caption. And screen readers will then just read the alt attribute and directly after that read the caption. So it's a redundancy. I'll play a screen recording of it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it, but let's see. So if you could hear that, it read Chicago skyline and then again Chicago skyline, because it read the alt text and then the caption. So we would use the null alt attribute value here, and then this is how VoiceOver will read the page. So if you can hear that, it skipped over the image and just read the caption. You may have also heard these helper words. So we also added ARIA labels to the image credit and caption. So the screen reader will read out the image caption before it reads the caption, and it will read out image credit before it reads the credit. Also, we did that for the byline. I'll play one more time. Hopefully you can hear. So those are from the ARIA labels. Now, editors can choose to inhibit the caption from showing any image via a checkbox in the CMS. And if they do that, then having a null alt attribute is not a good idea. So in that case, what was formerly the caption would then become the alt text again. And that sounds like this. So VoiceOver there read the alt text because there was nothing else. There was no image caption, so we used alt text. Keep in mind that an image that is the only thing inside of a link must never have the null alt attribute value. The functionality of the link should be mentioned in the alt text in addition to the content of the image. If you use a null alt attribute value and an image is the only thing in a link, then VoiceOver won't read anything helpful. Also, users who navigate via the tab key are going to hear this out of context. So if they tab to an image that just talks about, it has alt text that is just about the image and not the link, you're not going to hear anything relevant to where that link actually goes. And it helps sighted users too, because if the image doesn't load for whatever reason, then the alt text will be there telling them about the link. So just to reiterate, if this image was the only thing in the link, even if Chicago skyline is directly underneath it, you still need alt text. You can't use the null attribute value, because the alt text for the image should discuss the link as well as the image. So if you're like me and worry a little bit about getting this perfectly right, this quote was really helpful for me. It just says, like many things in web accessibility, determining appropriate equivalent alt text is often a matter of personal interpretation, and there's often not just one like, super right answer. So that's just really helpful to keep in mind as you're doing this. Lastly, just additional resources. There's a link to the developer tools, a couple articles that were really helpful about contrast testing. There's a mathematical formula to calculate the ratio if you're interested in that. Article on alt text, and then at the bottom, I wrote an article on our tech blog, basically about what I just spoke about. Also, if you're interested in what other people from the tech team and NPR are doing, check out npr.codes. So thanks for listening.
Any questions for that?
Yeah.
So what was the advantage of having a no alt tag versus not having like any alt tag?
If there's no alt tag at all, then the screen reader. So the question was, what's the advantage of using null as an alt attribute value versus nothing, not even having the alt tag? If there is no alt tag at all, then the screen reader will likely read the file name of the image, which is like super unhelpful. So,
Especially on the content management system.
yes, very long file names.
Yeah, I know you're in the UI UX department at NPR. I'm just curious, were there other areas of accessibility that NPR undertook in addition to the contrast issue?
Yeah, so we recently worked with ARIA landmarks and ARIA labels. We briefly touched on the labels. We added landmarks also. We have a skip to main content. For the player, we just launched a persistent player, an audio player. We added keyboard shortcuts for that, and a link you can get to via the tab key for getting help on the keyboard shortcuts themselves. Those are a few that come to mind. There's other things too.
That wasn't under your task list for your department? Or?
It was. Yeah.
Do you have an accessible video player on your site?
So the question was about an accessible video player. I know we are adding support for video captions. I don't know where that is yet in terms of if it's available, but there was work done for that. It's not a Flash player, so it's viewable on mobile. So those are two things that come to mind.
And just so you know, at United, we're using Able Player, which is, I believe it's open source. But if you just search on Able Player, you'll find it, and it can obviously just, have locally or, from YouTube.
So once you've simplified your color palette, and actually just going through that whole process, I mean, in my experience, a lot of times with UI designers and graphic visual designers is that they really get kind of territorial about changing colors.
Yeah.
So when you were going through that process, what were some of the reactions from the visual designers and user designers? And I would just, my background originally was in that space, and I always felt like once you simplify the color palette, it makes things a hell of a lot easier, from a creative development perspective. I was wondering whether you can share some insights into some of the learnings and growing pains.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, our visual designer, Josh Osborne, was very sympathetic to this. And so we would work over Slack or video calls. We'd send screenshots back and forth, like, hey, what do you think of this? Does this color look too different to you? And he was pretty willing to make changes, which really helped because I know.
Yeah. Is there any way, because it was somewhat hard in the projection to see the differences, is there any way we can get our hands on his presentation so I can just really, I'd like, sometimes they're so subtle and you just need to show an example to a visual designer, say, look, we're not asking you to change everything. It's such a subtle difference. Mm-hmm. Or it really doesn't change the integrity of the design. It just makes it more accessible.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can get here?
If you're willing to share the deck with attendees, we can get a link out to everyone. I know I was going to ask for the video editing afterwards.
Yeah, I'll send you that.
Cool. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Todd.